Okay, so picture this. I'm at my sister Allison's engagement dinner, right? And somehow, despite being family, there's no seat for me at the main table. I end up stuck at the bar, watching everything unfold, and then the check shows up. $2,800. They think I'll pay it. But here's the twist, they have no idea I've already cut off the family credit card. What happens next? Well, let's just say it gets messy, really messy. And you're going to want to see every second of it. So, the night before the engagement dinner, I'm just collapsing on my sofa, right migraine hammering through my skull, feeling like my head is vibrating with every heartbeat. 3 days straight of the stress migraines, cortisol levels through the roof, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I've pushed myself a little too far. I had been up late, crunching numbers for work, triple checking client audits, trying to untangle corporate financial fraud like it's nothing, all while juggling a family that seems to think my bank account is infinite. And then my phone buzzes, like a tiny, impatient alarm. I glance at it, and surprise Allison and Brandon's engagement dinner invites are plastered across my screen in gold, over the top, JPEG glory. She's texted the time, the place, everything, as if I'm just supposed to appear, like a guest in a movie, without being asked if I even wanted to go. And then, because life likes to pile it on, there's a follow-up from my mother, Melody. "Don't be late," she says. "Wear something decent. Brandon's parents are coming. Make a good impression." And I just stare at the ceiling, feeling that familiar, bitter burn of resentment creep up my throat. I mean, I'm 34, I've spent decades keeping this family afloat. Financially, I bought my mom's house. I've paid Allison's rent for years. That car she drives to her content shoots. Yeah, I financed that too. And now they're acting like I'm just another guest who should magically appear and cover a dinner I haven't even been asked about. It's exhausting. Physically, mentally, everything. And that's when it hits me they're expecting me to pay, not like. Casually, they want me to pick up the tab, like my existence is basically a credit card with legs. I close my eyes, trying to block the light of the phone screen that seems to burn an afterimage on my eyelids. And I feel it, the weight of it. I've been conditioned to be the fixer, the provider, the silent safety net. And now, after years of keeping everyone else afloat, it's all being taken for granted. And it's not just money, it's the emotional toll, the never-ending checklists of what needs to be handled, what has to be fixed. They've come to see me not as a sister or a daughter, but as a resource, a financial line that never runs dry. And here I am, feeling my body crack under the pressure. 3 days bedridden from a stress-induced migraine, and they don't even care to ask if I'm okay. They just send orders. They just expect compliance. My stomach twists, partly from nausea, partly from the frustration of realizing how predictable this pattern has been. All the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, all the jobs I've juggled to make sure the lights stayed on, the rent was paid, the bills covered, they never counted for anything beyond what they could take. And suddenly, it's so clear why I've been exhausted, why my body is screaming for rest. My cortisol levels, my overworked brain, my aching back, they all tell the same story you've been carrying too much for too long. Aurora, but here's the kicker, they assume the well is infinite. That, because I've always paid, I always will. They don't see me. They see the money, the time, the energy I can spare. and they expect it to be endless. It's a harsh, gutting realization, and I feel that mix of fury and disbelief rise in my chest. And through all of this, the migraine pulses, reminding me how fragile my own body has become under the constant stress. And yet, despite knowing all this, there's still that nagging, almost reflexive pull to comply, to show up, to keep the peace, because I've done it my entire life. But tonight, even as I stare at the golden invitation and the little instructions from my mom, something inside me begins to shift. There's anger, yes, but also clarity. They've been exploiting me for years, and I can feel, for the first time in a long while, that maybe I don't have to. Maybe I can actually step back and realize, yeah, I've given enough. And the expectation that I'll just pay for another extravagant dinner, for a celebration I didn't even get to be part of planning. That's the exact moment that pushes me to consider, seriously, that things have to change. I slumped onto the sofa, blanket wrapped tight around me, feeling like every ounce of energy had been leached from my body. My head was pounding, my stomach churned, and my phone buzzed again. Another reminder that life had no chill button. Mila was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with this terrifying, precise rhythm that made even the air feel tense. I mumbled, almost half-heartedly, that I should go to the engagement dinner. She didn't flinch at first, just kept slicing. Then she said, calm but deadly serious, "Aurora, you are not going." I blinked. I have to. Mila. Mom will call every 15 minutes. Allison will post some passive-aggressive story. It's just easier to go, endure it for a couple hours, and leave. She finally looked up, setting the knife down with a clack that made me jump. Her eyes were dark, serious, almost dangerous. Easier, Aurora. They're bleeding you dry. You just paid off Allison's credit card again, $6,000, and now they want you to show up to some fancy dinner. Do you even know what the prefix menu costs? I looked down, shame curling in my chest. Of course I knew. Chez L'Argent isn't the kind of place where you casually swing in, but I whispered, voice shaking. It's her engagement. Brandon proposed. He's probably chipping in too. Right. Mila laughed. But it wasn't a warm laugh. It was sharp, mirthless, and it made me wince. Chipping in? Please. They want you because they need your black card, not because he's contributing. He's hoping you'll handle the expenses like always. I closed my eyes, letting frustration, fear, and exhaustion wash over me. I knew she was right. I had always been the silent financial backbone, the fixer, the one who absorbed everyone else's chaos. And yet, a part of me still felt the old pull, the reflexive urge to comply. But something else had started stirring. Anger, yes, but also clarity. Mila moved closer, taking my hand, cold, steady, grounding. Honey, why are you still calling her sister? You are sick, literally sick from the stress they put on you. And not once have they asked if you're okay. Do you really think they see you? Her words landed hard. I swallowed. I think I need to go. I need to see it. I need to see if they actually expect me to foot the bill, to look Brandon in the eye and see if he really thinks he can marry into my payroll. Mila studied me, searching for cracks I didn't even know existed. Finally, she nodded slowly. Fine, we go, but on my terms. I'm driving. And if anyone says one word about your outfit or your job, we walk. Deal. I nodded, relief flooding in, grabbing my phone. I typed a short, measured reply to Mom. We'll be there. No excuses, no promises about paying, just a simple acknowledgement. Sending it. I felt the first flicker of control in days. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I'd spent the past week restructuring my finances, moving assets into protected trusts, separating my accounts from the joint access I'd foolishly granted my mom years ago. The well was no longer infinite. I leaned back, heart racing, thinking about everything I'd carried. 15 years ago, when Dad left, I was 19 and suddenly the adult in the house. Scholarships, jobs, barista shifts, tutoring, overnight data entry, whatever it took to keep the lights on. Melody floundered, discovering herself through crystals and meditation, while I kept the home running. Allison was 11. I bought her school clothes, paid for trips, even financed her college degree. I thought that generosity would earn love, or at least respect, but it only built entitlement. Now, staring at my phone, I realized that I could step back. I could show up on my own terms. No longer the silent ATM, no longer the fixer. I could observe, control, and enforce boundaries. This wasn't compliance, it was empowerment. It was clarity in the chaos. A conscious choice to reclaim some space, some dignity, some self-respect. For the first time in years, I was stepping into a room not as a doormat, but as a human being with limits. And for the first time, I felt a strange flicker of excitement mixed with fear. This dinner wouldn't break me. Not tonight. Mila and I pulled up to Chez l'Argent, and I swear, the place smelled like old money and truffle oil the second we stepped inside. Dim lighting, velvet booths, waiters with that faint judgmental air, you know the type, and a long, elegant table set with white roses and candles that screamed. Look at us. We have wealth. My stomach twisted, partly from nerves, partly from the migraine that hadn't fully eased. We spotted the table immediately. There was Mom, Melody, laughing at something Brandon's father said. Champagne in hand, completely in her element, Allison was at the head, phone in hand, snapping selfies, ring hand extended, capturing the perfect lighting. And then there was Brandon. He's the type of guy who looks like he belongs on a catalog cover, but his smile never quite reaches his eyes. I'd met him a few times, and each time, I walked away feeling like I needed a shower just to wash off the arrogance. "Ara, you made it," Brandon said vaguely, gesturing with a fork instead of standing. That's all. No warmth, no real greeting. Just a finger pointing like he owned the room. I forced a neutral, controlled voice. "Hello, Brandon, Melody, Allison." Allison glanced up from her phone, eyes scanning my outfit with a critical disapproval I knew so well. "Hey, you look tired. Did you not have time to put on concealer? I let it slide." "I've been sick," I said, waiting for a flicker of concern. Nothing. She flipped her hair and waved her hand. "Oh well. Try to perk up. Okay, the photographer is coming in 20 minutes. Mila squeezed my hand under the table, scanning the seats. I followed her eyes and froze. Place cards, calligraphy on heavy cardstock, every seat labeled, every name except ours. My chest tightened. We weren't on the list. Not anywhere. I felt the familiar sting of betrayal, that creeping resentment I thought I'd shoved down hours ago. Allison giggled, this sharp, abrasive little sound that grated on my nerves. Right. So about that, we kinda hit capacity for the main table. Brandon really needed his investors there. and I figured you wouldn't mind since you're family. Grab a spot at the bar or that high top over there, she said, pointing to a small, isolated table near the kitchen doors, practically in exile. Mila's voice dropped an octave, slow, dangerous, like a courtroom cross-examination. You invited us to an engagement dinner, and you didn't save a seat for your sister. Brandon leaned back in his chair, arm draped over Allison, with that smug little smirk. We're all in the same room. We'll still toast you guys. You're the silent partner, right? The engine behind the scenes. I stared at him, and here's the thing: I felt it all crystallize. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't inviting me as a guest. He was inviting me because he assumed I'd pay. He was testing my reaction, seeing if I'd just swallow the insult and hand over my credit card like always. And my stomach, once churning with nausea, settled into a cold, crystallized clarity. Silent partner. That's what I'd been, always, but not tonight, not anymore. I leaned closer to Mila, whispering, "It's fine. Bar is perfect." She nodded, eyes narrowing like a hawk spotting prey, and I signaled the bartender. Sparkling water for me, Pinot Noir for her, and a strict separate tab. Under no circumstances would anything touch the main table. David, the bartender, nodded, understanding. My chest tightened and eased simultaneously. I wasn't just observing. I was taking control. And as Brandon continued waving the waiter for the third time, ordering the most expensive scotch and Wagyu sliders like a kid showing off, I realized this dinner was no longer just a celebration. It was a stage, and I wasn't going to be a pawn. Mila and I settled onto the high stools at the bar, a perfect view of the main table and all the chaos unfolding. Honestly, it felt like watching a car crash in slow motion, except this car was made of gold-flake desserts, lobster towers, and people who thought money could buy dignity. Brandon was at the center, orchestrating the evening like a conductor, but the kind who's completely tone-deaf to the music. I watched as he waved over the waiter again, a sweeping motion in the air like he owned the universe. Another bottle of 15-year-old scotch for the table, and then Wagyu sliders, because apparently his ego required them. I felt my stomach twist, not from hunger, but from a mix of nausea and adrenaline. My migraine was breaking slightly, but my mind had never been sharper. And, that's when I remembered. Okay, Aurora, you have tools for this. You've run audits, traced fraud, uncovered financial lies. This is your playground. I nudged Mila. Watch this. He thinks I forgot to pay the bill or that I'll just swallow this. Her eyes were narrow, predatory. He's arrogant enough to assume you're weak, she murmured. I opened my banking app first. Years of shared accounts, emergency funds for family, the usual abuse of my generosity. But 3 days ago, from my sickbed, I closed the joint card and moved most of my liquid assets into a protected high-yield trust. Timing was perfect. The well wasn't infinite anymore, and Brandon had no idea. I scrolled down. Decline transaction, $4,500, the Ritz-Carlton, Maui. Decline transaction, $4,500 again. Decline $200 for Uber Black tonight. His first moves were already failing. He didn't know he'd been cut off, and I felt a strange thrill, cold and sharp, run through me. He thought he could manipulate me, and here he was, trying his usual routine on empty ground. Looks like he's already hitting walls, I whispered to Mila. She let out a low whistle. Good. Keep going. He thinks he's testing you. Let's see how far he's willing to push it. I tapped into a secure portal I used for work, the kind that's normally reserved for forensic investigations and corporate mergers. LexisNexis, public records, everything in one place. I typed in Brandon Miller's name, the date of birth from the invite. Spin, spin, spin. There. A dense list of public records populated the screen, and I started scanning, my pulse quickening. I whispered, okay, he claims to be a blockchain consultant with holdings in Dubai, but there are 3 active liens in Florida, evicted from an apartment in Miami 6 months ago. His consultancy firm is an LLC registered to a P.O. box in Delaware, dissolved by the state last year for failure to pay taxes. Mila leaned over, her eyes widening just slightly. And he thinks you're going to cover tonight. He really thinks you'll just pay. I nodded, swallowing hard. He's betting on my need to save face, my reflex to protect Allison's image, to keep the peace. But not tonight. Not anymore. Brandon was still gesturing wildly, holding a crab leg like he was commanding an army, laughing at something. Mr. Henderson said, completely oblivious to the trail of destruction he was leaving. And I realized I wasn't just watching. I was cataloging, analyzing, predicting. Everything about him was a lie, a performance built to manipulate the people around him. Mila's voice cut softly, almost in awe. Aurora, you're working? I shot her a glance, smirked faintly. I'm protecting my investment. Silent partner has rights. We watched as he leaned over to Allison, whispering, maybe plotting, maybe consoling. I couldn't tell, but his mask of charm was cracking. I tapped into another app for a preliminary background check. Something I had started the day Allison announced the engagement, but had put aside while sick. Now, fueled by a mixture of indignation and adrenaline, I dove deep. Every record, every prior eviction, every failed business filing, it all lined up like a perfect pattern of desperation disguised as success. He's broke, Mila, completely insolvent, using this dinner to pitch investors, hoping their money covers his debts before he marries Allison. He's a professional grifter, not a visionary, I whispered, voice tight with disbelief. Mila's expression shifted from annoyance to something sharper, almost lethal. And he thinks you'll let him just hand over your money. I closed my phone, locking the screen. He's betting I'm too weak to act. But I'm not. Not tonight. Allison glowed at the table, oblivious, laughing at some joke, completely unaware that her financial stability and her perception of reality was about to be exposed. I watched Brandon, this so-called visionary, faltering under the scrutiny of the only person whose numbers really mattered me, and it was intoxicating in a quiet, cold way. For once, the game was mine to control. I sipped my sparkling water, heart hammering, eyes tracing every gesture, every order, every interaction. My migraines had faded into the background, replaced by the sharp clarity of justice. I felt Mila's hand on my arm, a grounding reminder that we were a team, that I wasn't alone in this. And I thought, finally, they're about to see the truth. All those years of blind compliance, of absorbing their chaos, of pretending the well was infinite, they've forgotten the most important rule. The well only flows if I allow it. Brandon didn't notice the subtle shifts, the tightening of my jaw, the faint spark of calculation in my eyes. He was still playing his part, still smiling at investors, still thinking tonight would end like every other time, me paying the tab, saving the day, keeping the family illusion intact. But I had already rewritten the script. I knew every loophole, every weak point, every lie. And from our vantage point at the bar, I felt the power settle in my chest. Like a quiet storm waiting to break, I whispered to Mila, almost to myself, "The trap is set. Now, we wait for the bill." And there it was. The tension, the anticipation, the meticulous observation, every move he made, every gesture of entitlement, every assumption of compliance. It was all documented in my mind, calculated, ready. I wasn't just a witness. I was the architect of the night's inevitable reckoning. And sitting there, drinking sparkling water and watching him orchestrate his own downfall, I felt alive, sharp, finally unburdened by the false obligations that had weighed me down for far too long. By the time the bill arrived at the main table, Mila and I were ready. I had my separate tab, strict instructions to the bartender. Nothing from the main table touched us. I watched Brandon, smug and confident, wave the waiter over like he was directing traffic. He had no idea the ground beneath him had shifted. The waiter approached, leather folder in hand, and Brandon's smile was too wide, that overconfident grin of someone used to getting their way. I leaned slightly toward Mila, whispering, "Okay, here we go." Brandon tapped the folder, pointing vaguely in my direction, then mouthed something. I caught it. "My sister over there." I felt a flicker of amusement mixed with disbelief. He honestly thought he could manipulate me from across the room. David, our bartender, hesitated, glancing between Brandon and me. I didn't even look up, just gave him a steady nod, barely audible. Strictly separate, our tab only. David's eyes sharpened. He understood. The waiter returned to the table, folder in hand, confusion on Brandon's face. I could practically see the gears grinding in his head. This wasn't how it normally went. Brandon stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly. All eyes in the restaurant turned. He marched toward the bar, Allison trailing nervously, his face red with frustration. "Ara," he barked, voice carrying, teeth clenched. "What is the meaning of this? Why is the waiter giving me the bill?" I turned slowly on the stool, facing him, calm, measured, almost casual. "Because you ordered the food, Brandon. Usually, that's how restaurants work. You handle the logistics, I handle networking. We are not a team tonight. I'm not even a guest. Just a patron at the bar. Capacity issues? Remember?" Allison shrieked, high-pitched, frantic. "Oh my God, Aurora, stop. You're embarrassing us, just pay." I ignored her. Brandon leaned closer, desperation leaking from his posture. Expensive cologne mingling with the faint scent of anxiety. But she's family. She has the money. It's a mistake. Mila stood then, calm but utterly lethal in her courtroom voice. "Mr. Miller, I'd advise extreme caution in making defamatory claims about my client's mental health in public, especially when we know about your 3 outstanding liens in Florida and the dissolved LLC in Delaware." Brandon froze, pale, the bravado evaporating like mist. His smirk faltered, replaced by panic. "What did you say?" Mila's voice didn't waver. Crisp, devastatingly clear. "We are not on your table, not on your bill. And given your financial record, I suggest finding another way to settle before the authorities are involved. Fraud of services is a felony. Brandon. The restaurant fell silent. Even the background jazz seemed to hold its breath. Patrons leaned in slightly, whispering, noticing. Brandon's eyes darted between us, then to the manager. His confidence had crumbled. Sweat beaded on his forehead. You check my background, he stammered. That's illegal, I'll sue. I smiled faintly. Unbothered. Public records. Brandon, it's literally my job to notice when numbers don't add up. And you, sir, are a mathematical impossibility. Melody. My mother rushed over, panic written across her face. Aurora. Stop this. You're ruining everything. Just pay the bill. We can fix it later. No. Mom, I said. Voice calm but resolute. We can't fix it later. You assume I'll pay every time, but not tonight. This ends now. Brandon. Shaking. Tried to plead with Allison. Darling, she'll cover it. Just pay the bill. I'll settle it later. Allison? What? With what? The joint account I closed 3 days ago, I asked. Deadpan. She froze, the color draining from her face. He laughed nervously, trying to regain control. She's off her meds. Mental health episode. Ignore her. Mila stepped forward again. Sharp, precise. Mr. Miller. We're done with the theatrics. Fraud is a felony. Theft of services. Consider this your final warning. You have no right to my client's money tonight. Brandon's eyes widened, realizing the room was watching, the investors staring. His hand trembled. He had no exit, no safety net, no magic card to swipe. I leaned slightly, eyes cold, voice even. Sir, card or cash, now. Otherwise, the police will have to intervene. He scrambled, fumbling pockets, looking for a wallet he didn't have. Allison was sobbing, mascara streaked, mouth open. Melody was frantic, pleading, but I remained steady. Hand resting lightly on Mila's arm for reassurance. The manager returned, polite, professional, yet firm. Sir, we need a form of payment now. Brandon's panic was almost tangible. He gestured helplessly. I have a watch, a Rolex. Take it. The manager inspected it for a second and handed it back. Knockoff, worth $50. The collective gasp from the restaurant was audible. Allison's jaw dropped. Brandon turned gray, sweat now streaming, fumbling to explain, voice cracking. It's a placeholder, insurance, crypto thing. Allison grabbed her ring, staring at it in disbelief. She scratched it, realizing it was cubic zirconia, not the 3-carat diamond she thought she had. Silence filled the restaurant, thicker than before. A low hum of anticipation. Brandon's lies, his financial manipulations, his assumptions all collapsing. Investors whispering, patrons recording on phones, the social proof of his failure visible to everyone. I stayed calm, collected, knowing this was the culmination of observation, research, and preparation. Every move he made was documented, analyzed. He had no plan beyond expecting me to pay, and that plan had failed spectacularly. Mila and I remained seated, quietly, as the police eventually arrived. Brandon was cuffed, protesting, flailing, still trying to argue, while the chaos at the table grew. Allison and Melody were stunned, the shock settling on them like a wet blanket. And through it all, I felt an incredible weight lift finally. The boundaries I'd set were respected, and the silent partner had spoken. I didn't have to pay. I wasn't the scapegoat. For the first time in years, The rules of the game had changed, and I was in control. By the time Brandon realized he wasn't getting the tab from me, the tension in the room shifted. He turned to the investors at the table, panic flickering across his face. The Hendersons were watching now, subtle frowns knitting their brows as they caught on that something wasn't right. Brandon tried to recover, attempting that smooth, confident grin, but it faltered almost instantly. This is just a misunderstanding," he stammered, voice tight, glancing at me as if I might blink and rescue him. I didn't. I was calm, steady. Every bit the silent partner I'd claimed to be. Mila's presence at my side was like a shield. Her glare alone could cut glass. Brandon swallowed, looking to Allison for support. She was frozen, eyes wide, mascara streaked from panic, the weight of the moment finally sinking in. Ara, just pay the bill. We can sort it out later," she whispered, desperation lacing her voice. The room felt like it contracted around him, all eyes pulling in, waiting for a resolution he could no longer control. I leaned forward slightly, voice measured but cutting through the murmur of the room. "Brandon, you ordered the food. You signed for it. We are not on your bill. You misrepresented your financial situation, and that misrepresentation is about to catch up with you." His face went pale, beads of sweat forming along his temple. That's not true. I have assets, investments." The blockchain project Mila stepped between him and me, crisp and professional. "Mr. Miller, consider carefully how you respond. You've already misrepresented your finances to investors, and now you've attempted to manipulate your family for personal gain. Publicly making false claims here could constitute fraud. You are on notice." Brandon opened his mouth, then shut it, his words failing him. The Hendersons exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to outright concern. "Sir, if I may, Mr. Henderson finally said, standing slowly. "We were considering investing in your venture, but now, seeing how you handle obligations and misrepresent your assets, I believe we need to reconsider." Brandon's panic grew, gestures frantic. No, I promise. The liquidity it's just tied up. It'll clear in 3 days." He looked around, hoping for some sympathy, some magic rescue. There was none. Every lie he tried to spin was crumbling. Misses. Henderson leaned forward, sharp and commanding. "Sir, a liquidity pool or not, you cannot cover this table. Yet, you invited us under false pretenses to pitch your project. That is a serious concern." "We are leaving," Allison shrieked, grabbing his arm. "Wait, no, please, you can explain. They don't understand." I interrupted softly but firmly, voice carrying just enough for the table to hear. "They understand perfectly. You cannot fund what you promised, and you misrepresented everything. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a pattern, and it stops here." Brandon's face turned a sickly gray. He looked like a man realizing he'd just fallen into a trap he had set for everyone else. The manager stepped forward, polite but firm, confirming the order if the bill wasn't settled immediately. Authorities would be called. Brandon's gestures became more desperate. "I have a watch." "Take it as collateral," he gasped, pulling a gold timepiece from his wrist. The manager glanced at it, raised an eyebrow, and handed it back. "Knock off, sir. Maybe $50. The collective gasp from the room was audible. Allison's mouth fell open. Melody's hands flew to her face, Brandon's bluff was entirely exposed. The restaurant's attention had shifted completely. Patrons leaned in, smartphones out, capturing the spectacle. The Hendersons were standing, Mr. Henderson now fully composed, his patience spent. "We are leaving. This ends now." Brandon stumbled, his voice cracking. We just give us another chance. "Please, the funds will," Mrs. Henderson, calm but merciless, cut him off. "You invited us here under false pretenses. You cannot settle your obligations. And you misled everyone. This is not a negotiation. Leave." Brandon turned to Allison, voice pleading. "She has money, my fiancé. She'll cover." Allison looked down, stunned, realization dawning. Her hand went slack as she held the ring, the illusion of her engagement and the financial security it promised shattering. Her sobs were quiet but unmistakable. Melody, frantic, shouted, "Aurora, pay it please, we can fix this." I stayed seated, calm, collected. My hand rested on Mila's arm, feeling the weight of our teamwork, the strength we had together. "Mom, we cannot fix his lies. He made this bed. Tonight, he faces the consequences." Brandon, flustered and desperate, lunged toward the manager, but the officer calmly stepped in, guiding him aside. "Sir, please step outside." I leaned back slightly, watching him being led away. The tension in the room was electric. Silence enveloped us, punctuated only by quiet whispers and the soft clink of remaining silverware. Allison and Melody were frozen, processing the collapse of Brandon's charade. The Hendersons nodded subtly, an unspoken acknowledgement that the truth had emerged. They had been misled, but they now saw clearly the difference between performance and reality, between promises and deceit. Brandon's attempts to lie, to manipulate, to cover his insolvency had all failed spectacularly in full view of everyone he intended to impress. Allison finally whispered, "Broken. He lied. He's a fraud." I gave her a steady look, calm but firm. "Yes. And now it's visible to everyone who matters. No one's paying your bills tonight. No one's being fooled." The police gently led Brandon out, handcuffed, as Allison and Melody followed, stunned and silent. Patrons whispered, taking it all in, some laughing quietly, some shaking their heads. The weight of deception, the consequences of misrepresentation, hung in the air like a dense fog. Sitting at the bar, Mila and I shared a quiet glance. My chest felt lighter, clearer, unburdened for the first time in a decade. Brandon had been exposed. Allison had a harsh lesson in reality, and Melody had to confront the limits of her assumptions. The table that had once symbolized control, manipulation, and expectation had crumbled, and I, finally, could breathe. The silent partner had acted. The consequences were now public, immediate, and irrevocable, and for the first time in years, I felt the immense, satisfying clarity of boundaries enforced, of truth revealed, of justice quietly, completely served. After the chaos at Chez Largent settled, the aftermath hit like a tidal wave, but in a good way. Finally, Brandon was charged with theft of services and fraud, and it turned out the Ritz-Carlton fiasco wasn't even his first. Once his name hit the police blotter, other luxury venues came forward with unpaid bills, each one a testament to his pattern of deception. He pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy trial and ended up with 6 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. His blockchain consultancy dissolved almost overnight. the illusions of success evaporating like mist. It was satisfying, to say the least. Watching someone who had tried to manipulate, exploit, and pressure everyone around him face tangible consequences was strange, almost surreal. There was no dramatic fight, no cinematic showdown, just the law quietly asserting itself, and Brandon stripped of the control he assumed he had. Meanwhile, for me, it was like the air cleared. The migraines that had haunted me for days, sometimes weeks, started to vanish. My cortisol levels, which had been through the roof from the relentless stress, finally began to drop. I slept through the night without the heavy weight of dread pressing on my chest. It was remarkable, the way my body began to heal the moment I refused to be the source of other people's entitlement any longer. Money I had once funneled into paying off Allison's rent or financing her lifestyle was now going towards something that mattered to me and Mila, a small, quiet vacation fund, a tangible symbol of boundaries, finally respected and enforced. I'd reclaimed my assets, my health, my sanity. Allison slowly began to confront her own responsibilities. The first contact from her came 3 months later while I was buried in a forensic audit at my office. Her text blinked across my screen. "Hey, I got a job. It's just reception at a dental office, but it pays hourly. I moved back in with Mom. We're splitting the bills. It sucks. I missed the apartment, but I saw the ring report. The police gave it back with his stuff. It was literal glass. I'm sorry about the dinner, about everything. I don't expect you to fix this. I just wanted you to know I'm working." I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering. There was no dramatic apology, no plea for forgiveness. Just accountability in its rawest form. For once, she was taking the first small steps toward managing the consequences of her actions, rather than relying on me to absorb the fallout. I typed back, simple and neutral. "I'm glad you found a job. Allison, good luck. No offers, no rescuing, just acknowledgement." And it felt good, freeing. I didn't have to carry the weight of someone else's mistakes any longer. That evening, Mila and I went out for dinner, not to a 5-star seafood palace, not to a place with truffle oil and velvet, but to a small, cozy Italian spot we loved. Pasta homemade, wine cheap but good, atmosphere relaxed. When the bill came, there was no anxiety, no darting eyes, no wondering if someone else would cover the cost. I paid it, of course, but it wasn't a burden. It was simple. It was mine. Mila smiled, teasing gently, to the silent partner. I shook my head with a grin, signing the receipt with flourish. "No." To the majority shareholder, I corrected, savoring the private joke, because that's what it felt like. I had regained control. Not just over the financial aspects, but over the family dynamic itself, over the narrative of my life. That $2,800 dinner had cost Brandon and my family dearly. But for me, the price of admission to my new life was free, clean, empowering, and it was more than money. It was about boundaries. It was about health. It was about asserting myself and refusing to be manipulated. No matter how much guilt, expectation, or tradition had been piled onto me for decades, I'd learned that generosity without limits doesn't earn love or respect, it earns exploitation. And I had finally drawn a line in the sand. There was a lesson in watching Allison grapple with a responsibility too. It wasn't comfortable for her. She was learning to face the consequences of her choices, to earn her place in the adult world. And slowly, she was doing it. There was humility in that, a quiet growth that had nothing to do with me enabling her. I felt proud, in a distant, detached way. Not because I had fixed her life, but because I could finally watch her learn to manage it herself. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Mom still struggled with expectations, old patterns, and disappointment. But for me, the freedom to step back, the clarity of boundaries, and the ability to prioritize my own life created space I had never known before. Sleep returned, migraines faded, anxiety lifted. I put energy into work I loved, into the life Mila and I shared, into experiences that mattered to us. The air was lighter, the future felt manageable, and the constant tug of obligation had finally loosened. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, I realized it wasn't just about the $2,800, the fraudulent fiancé, or the chaos at the restaurant. It was about reclaiming agency, asserting boundaries, and protecting my mental and physical health. It was about understanding that love and family support are not measured in dollars or blind compliance, but in respect, reciprocity, and accountability. The engagement dinner had been a test of patience, of observation, of courage, and I had passed not by fighting fire with fire, but by calmly enforcing the rules I had finally set for myself. In the months that followed, I noticed subtle shifts in the family dynamic. Allison called more rarely. Updates were honest, small steps toward accountability. And Mila and I thrived in the space we had carved for ourselves. I had reclaimed myself in a way I never thought possible. And every small victory, sleeping through the night, enjoying meals without tension, watching my finances grow undisturbed, felt like a celebration in its own right. The heavy, suffocating weight of expectation had lifted, and with it came clarity, empowerment, and a rare kind of peace. The fallout from that engagement dinner had been spectacular. Yes, but it had cleared away the toxic structure that had dominated my life for years. And in its place, for the first time, there was room to breathe, to heal, and to truly live. And just like that, I reclaimed control of my finances, my boundaries, my health, and even the way I navigate family drama. It wasn't easy, and the fallout was messy, but it taught me the power of standing firm. Sometimes saying no is the first step to freedom. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more real-life moments of empowerment and boundary setting, consider hitting like and subscribing. There's plenty more drama, lessons, and victories ahead, and I'd love to share them with you.